Hi everyone and welcome to Bruce Yaps. This video is in response to a quote by Billy Corgan that's been floating around my periphery for probably the last 4 months on social media. I'll put the exact quote in the description, but to paraphrase, he's accusing the music industry at large of pushing out rock and roll out of the mainstream in the late 90s in favor for pop and hip hop. This comes off as fairly paranoid to me, considering the fact that Billy Corgan is one of the legendary performers of rock and roll now, and he's had so much success before and even now. Zwan and his solo project and even Smashing Pumpkins aren't quite at the level of fame or success they used to be during the Smashing Pumpkins' first 3 albums anyway, or sorry, albums 2 through 4, Gish, Siamese Dream, and Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. But you'd be a little hard-pressed to find someone who would think that Billy Corgan hasn't had quite a bit of success over the years. He describes this entity or this force that pushed rock and roll out of the mainstream as a wizard behind the curtain, and also has a offhanded comment that some people say that someone in the CIA was involved, which doesn't exactly help the case against accusations of paranoia. It could all be true technically, where it's a fairly vague statement where he doesn't really name any names, he doesn't really name any event. It's a very vague blanket statement just saying that a force pushed rock and roll out of the mainstream. I think what seems more likely is that tastes both changed and broadened and spread out. And what I mean by that is when we had programs like Napster and LimeWire and some of the more stable successors come and we got our hands on them, there really wasn't anything dictating us to listen to a certain style of music. It wasn't just what we could see on MTV or Much Music or hear on the radio. And there was a lot less shared experience when it came to music, which you could argue is a bad thing. But one thing that was good and I think positive for people who love music is that you could look for and find any genre you really wanted to, and you could curate your own tastes to what was actually out there rather than what was funneled through to you. One thing I find very interesting is that when this quote pops up and I'm digging through comments and responses and that sort of thing, I notice a lot of people agreeing with the sentiment that at some point in their lives they've noticed that there was a dramatic shift away from rock music, and that they agree with the whole notion that it felt like rock music was being pushed out of the mainstream rather than any sort of natural evolution. And obviously, we're in some ways debating about just perception at that point, but it does kind of bring about an interesting tension with fans of rock music in general, where we can't seem to really figure out how successful we want rock music to be. It's a tension in rock music and in fans of rock music that's existed as long as I've been alive, as far as I can remember, where we want to hold on to the idea that this music is on the fringes of the mainstream or just outside the mainstream, but we're all a little bit offended when rock isn't dominating the mainstream. You can even see this tension when it comes to discussing specific bands. One of my favorite examples is Nickelback. When they first came out, basically everybody loved them, at minimum a guilty pleasure. Then at some point, they got so big, everyone hated them. And then they got so hated that everyone came back around to saying, you know what, Nickelback wasn't that bad. I'm just yapping. In conclusion, Billy Corgan has either lost his mind or is a genius or both. And if you yourself, who is watching this video, is part of a local rock band, I hope you see levels of success that makes everyone hate you. Thank you for listening to me yap.